There's good stress and there's bad stress. All right, good stress is what gets us up, gets us going and gets us moving. It motivates us to go out and try things and do things and be active and proactive and learn and keep moving forward. Difficulty is the bad stress is when it gets all too much and we can't cope with it. And so I look at it, this idea of having a crack at things. Yeah, you've got to have a go. Don't be scared to have a go, but you've got to make sure you do all the analysis first. You've got to find good mentors, good people to talk to. So that way you make sure it's good stress rather than bad stress.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You'll hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Hi Freedom Fighters. What do you think when something goes wrong? Do you blame others or the circumstance or the situation? Or do you reflect and think, what did I do? What do I need to do to fix it? And how can I do it differently next time? The reality is that it's all in our heads. Our thinking, our attitudes, and our mindset. Now in recent times, I've come to realise that sustainable success in any endeavour lies at the intersection of self, health, and wealth. And we need to do the work on all three in concert. Without any one of them, it's just not going to happen. And at the base of this is self. How do we think? How do we respond? What are our attitudes? What conscious and unconscious thought patterns and mindset drive our outcomes? And it's this internal mirror work that we rarely spend time on, as we tend to focus on the external and the others. Why? Because it's a lot easier to focus on others than look at ourselves and assess our mindset. Your thinking mindset's one of the foundational principles I talk about in my book, The Freedom Formula, where I elaborate on the 6 mental P's. And they are purpose, perspective, planning, proactiveness, probability or your sleep at night factor, and the importance of patience and persistence. As an illustration in investment thinking terms, as I quote in the book, the only real difference between successful buy and holders and the average investor is in their thinking. You see, buy and holders view volatility like the flu. Yeah, it's not fun, it can hurt, but you're probably going to get it about once a year. And when you do, it's not the end of the world. You drink some water, you take a nap, you wait it out, life goes on, and you'll be healthy before long. On the flip side though, average investors, on the other hand, think of volatility like stage 4 cancer, something that shouldn't occur, should be utterly feared, and attacked mercilessly with the most extreme treatments. But the scores are in. No true long-term buy and hold has ever lost money, while the vast majority of short-term traders have. So if your thinking and mindset's so important, have you ever seen a psychologist? No, this is not a trick question or a loaded question that suggests you must have a problem or there's something wrong with you if you need to go and see one. Because the truth is, I've been seeing psychologists off and on now for many years, because I need them to help me to think better as a starting point to doing better. Someone who can ask the hard questions and keep me accountable for making the changes in my fears and my thinking patterns so that I can keep improving. So that I'm interpreting and responding to the world in a way that serves me better. And this is not quick work or easy work, but it's absolutely fundamental work if you want to enjoy a fulfilled life long term. Why? Because it helps us tackle the big issues and answer the hard questions. Things like, What's the psychology of performance and success, and how does this help us? How can we think better to do better? How do we set our children up for success to cope with the increasingly high expectations of our times? And to answer these questions, I felt it was best to talk to an expert who specialises in helping you to do the internal work that will help you enjoy happier and more fulfilling lives. And this is where today's guest, Tim Dansie, comes in. Tim's a registered teacher and a psychologist. And after failing Year 11 and then not quite making it as an elite Test cricketer, Tim spent 12 years working in schools as a teacher and psychologist before establishing his own private practice where he now works with children, families, teachers and schools with his unique understanding and approach about what is required to improve a student's education. He's also got a really special interest and skill in helping children with learning difficulties. And given his love for all things sport, he also works with elite level athletes, consulting to the Adelaide Footy Club, and provides career guidance to Adelaide United in the A-League, along with a string of other elite international athletes across the full spectrum of sporting disciplines. Now, in our wide-ranging and engaging discussion today, he answers all of your important questions, including what are the 5 secret principles to happiness? How is success really defined? What's the difference between good stress and bad stress? What is a process thinker and why is this important to you? And why is it important to be balanced and how can you achieve this? If you're really serious about long-term sustainable success and you agree that success is an elite team sport, then you need a good psychologist on your side to get your head set right. So please enjoy this great, easygoing and enlightening conversation with Tim Dansie. Hi, Freedom Fighters. Well, lately I've been talking a lot about the interconnected importance of self, health and wealth. And today we're going to dig into the self and the importance of psychology to performance with someone who spends pretty much all of his life helping people of all ages, vocations and situations to live better lives. So let's get invested. Tim Dansie, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much. Lovely to have a chat.
Great to have you here, mate, and appreciate you spending some time, given that you've just returned from an OS trip.
Yep.
But, mate, for those that don't know you, can you start off by giving us a quick rundown on who you are, what you do, and where you're currently heading, please, mate?
Okay, so currently I run my own practice, Tim Dansie Psychology, and so I've been in my own practice now for 17 years. Prior to that, I was a teacher. So I was a teacher within the independent school system for 12 years. So basically my job is working in schools and with families, helping people achieve better outcome, particularly kids who have difficulties with learning. That's my main area. But I also I'm a general psychologist, so I work with adults as well, often dealing with adults who might be stressed or have some anxiety challenges, depression, etc., all the typical mental illnesses we hear about today. Also do a little bit of work in sport as well. So, I've worked with the Crows and Adelaide United and do a bit of work with some elite athletes currently, just in improving performance overall. So, busy job, but one I absolutely love.
Fantastic, man. And tell us, why do you do what you do?
Well, it's interesting. I sort of look at it and reflect. I think a lot of what we do in our vocations, you've got to look back to what your parents do, and so and how you're guided as well. And I was my mum was a teacher, and my father was a very good sports person, but also heavily invested in coaching and working with people. And so I think as children, you grow up seeing these role models, and so we were all brought up to play sport, but also get involved in community activities and coaching and helping people. And for me, I sort of have taken that a little bit of a step further through my studies in teaching and then in psychology. So, I enjoy helping people, but also watching people learn and grow. That to me is the best outcome.
Yeah.
Make a difference.
Yeah. Awesome. So we've got a bit better sense of your journey so far. Do you mind sort of taking us back to as early as you would like?
Sure.
And just talk us through where you've invested your time, your energy and your money.
Okay, so Yeah, absolutely. Well, the way I describe myself, I was a kid who successfully failed school. I was just an absolute disaster at school. I was one of these kids, if I had a maths test, I used to rub my pillowcase against my forehead, go into Mum and say, geez, Mum, I'm feeling a bit warm. And she'd put her hand on my forehead and say, geez, you are a bit warm. So I'd stay home and play basketball all day, ring my mates up, get the answer to the maths test, go and do the maths test the next day, get 19 out of 20. You never get 20 out of 20 or they'll ask too many questions. And no working out. And then, so I struggled at school. So I left seeking a career as a professional sports person. And after 4 years and earning $25, decided that wasn't a great career move. So I went back and did my year 12 studies as an adult.
Okay.
And went off to university and studied primary school teaching with a major in PE because I wanted to be basically a PE teacher.
Right.
And then did that for, whilst I was doing that, I did all my studies in psychology.
Yeah.
So that was pretty full on time. So I was going to teaching all day, then going off to uni in the evenings. So psych studies are another 7 years on top of what I'd already done, and then sort of gone on and done masters in psychology as well. So I've done a lot of university education over the years.
Let's dig into some of the motivations on that, if I can, in terms of why you've done some of those things. And let's kick off with the sport thing initially. I mean, it's a lot of, particularly boys, the old childhood dream of becoming a sports hero. Tell us a bit about your journey in that area and where you started and where you finished and why.
Well, my father was a very talented sportsman, so he played over 100 games for South Australia in cricket.
Okay.
So we grew up in a family, and my mother was a very good hockey player, and so we grew up in a family where we were encouraged to play sport. And so we were all very, very passionate about it. And what that did was, I guess, made me look at a career in sport. That was something I always wanted to do. Yeah. So that was one of the biggest drivers for us. But it was just that point where you're playing and you're enjoying it, but you get to the point where you realise, well, I'm actually probably not quite good enough, and so that led to a change in direction for me. And that's hard.
Yeah, let's dig into your thinking in that time, mate, if I can. How did that realisation come about? Because it would have been pretty confronting, I imagine, the end of the dream. Yeah, talk us about that.
It is very hard because you sort of, I got to the age where I was probably 23 years old, I think.
Yeah. And
I'd been playing some pretty good cricket. And I was sort of in the South Australian Shield squad, and I just couldn't break into the senior team. There's a couple of players ahead of me who were in the Australian squad and playing for Australia, so it just never worked out. And I sort of looked at it and thought, well, I could maybe go to a different state and have a crack at it, but it was never going to be a long-term career for me.
Yeah.
And I was never going to be financially secure if I followed that pathway.
Yeah.
So I was also at that point starting my teaching career and interested in students who had difficulties with learning because that was me. And so I thought, all right, let's just have a look at what are my alternatives. And so I decided my best pathway was to focus my energies into developing myself as a psychologist through my studies while still enjoying sport and playing sport. So it is a hard call. But look, being a professional athlete is very, very difficult. Very few people actually end up with a career as a professional athlete. And I'm happy to say I had a pretty good crack at it, but I just wasn't quite good enough.
And it's a pretty short career too, though, I guess, and that probably in your thinking at the time, I'm guessing, yeah?
Yeah. Look, the average time in the AFL, I think, is 2.2 years or something. Played 28 games.
Yeah, right.
And you think there's a lot of guys who play 300 games, 250 games, but it is a very, very short time. And to actually make a living out of it, to set yourself up for life, is quite difficult. I heard a fact the other day that I'm not sure if this is true or not, but in American sport, within 5 years, 90% of their professional athletes are bankrupt.
Is that right?
Yeah. and you're just thinking, wow, how can that happen? But then you look at it and think, gambling, divorce, bad investments, and poor management. So
where they go from the rock star lifestyle to falling off a cliff, and the lifestyle often doesn't change, but the income does, and before you know
it... Oh, that's right. Yeah.
The world's a very different place. Yeah, interesting. Well, tell us a bit about, because the move into psychology is an interesting one. I'd love you to take us through your thinking and motivations around why you decided to do that, please, mate.
Oh, yeah, well, because when I was teaching, I was often out on a lot of school camps. I was a PE teacher, so spent a great time just kayaking up and down rivers or bike riding with students, and I really enjoyed talking to them.
Yeah.
And I found that you get to know kids and enjoyed listening to their stories, but also helping them. And I think that was probably one of the main reasons. But also I had a lot of empathy for kids who had difficulty with learning and who actually just didn't like school. And that was me. I hated school with a passion. Yeah. And so I thought, righto, what can I do that can help these kids and make a difference to these kids? So that was the main reason. And I also was quite keen to do a bit of work in sport. So they were the two factors. The other thing, which I did also think about, was that I love teaching, absolutely loved it. But the thing I didn't like about teaching is that you're governed by bells and time frames.
Yeah.
And as a teacher, you get 12 weeks holiday a year, but you never got to have your holidays when you wanted your holidays. And so that used to do my head in. I was quite keen to have a vocation or work in a job where I actually had a little bit more control over my time and can have holidays when I want them. So that was also a little factor in it as well. Just and also the income, like working as a psychologist compared to a teacher in private practice. Well, the incomes are significantly better as a psychologist. So there's a few factors there.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk a little bit around that passion of yours and helping kids with learning difficulties.
Yeah.
Love you sort of talk us through that, because I think I heard Seth Godin say recently that, and he's pretty critical of the education system because his feeling is that it tends to produce more of the same and a reliant, compliant, order-taking sort of employee class almost that stops learning and stops thinking and stops creating. What's your views around that, mate? Is that an accurate description of the situation here in Australia, or do you find it different given you delving into that?
We really need to have an overhaul of our education system. The difficulty, as I see it, is that we've got far too much stuff in the curriculum for kids at the moment.
Yeah.
And there's not enough choice.
Yeah.
And we're still in this mentality that we're university driven, that we think that we must guide all kids into university, which is completely wrong. What we've got to do is learn more about our kids, learn more about how they learn, and then guide them into a vocation of interest. And see, when I do a lot of report writing, one of the phrases I always use is we need to guide a student into a vocation of interest within their capabilities. Yes. And the thing is, we've got to understand their capabilities because all kids are different. Some kids will thrive in subjects like maths and science. Other kids will thrive in subjects like art and drama. But we try and put them all in the same box. And it's just, it's hopeless. And this is why kids don't like school and are struggling at school. And we also need to get a bit more of the creative thinking. And the other thing, I think, is we need to bring sport back into schools. We're really lacking in that area, that social communication, social development, being part of a team. So, I do think we need to have a really good shake-up of our system. But also, I think the universities need to have a good look at themselves too about what sort of students they are accepting, because I see so many kids in my practice who go off to university and fail in their first 2 years because they weren't prepared for university.
Yeah,
and that's a disaster.
I know myself, mate, coming from the humble Watertown High School down the southeast thrown into 5 years of architecture. I struggled like hell that first year because it wasn't about black or white anymore. It wasn't about the hours you put in. There's a lot of discretionary, self-driven stuff, and I did find that particularly challenging, I must say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's I think there's so many more opportunities for our kids, but I don't think the schools are letting them have them at this point.
Mate, you run a great podcast about setting your child up for success.
Thank you.
Would you like to share some of the gold and some of the key things you believe that, for all of us listening who have kids that are going through the system, what are the things that we need to be thinking about to set up the future generation for success, do you believe?
Oh, look, one of the first things I always say is parenting is unbelievably hard. These days we have so many books, so many podcasts, so many YouTube clips. There is so much information, and parents are expected to be experts, and it's impossible. So one of the first things I'd always say to parents is don't be too hard on yourself. Accept that we are going to make mistakes. There's going to be times when we will clash with our kids and we won't like our kids, and that's fine. But what we've got to do is just make sure that we're actually there for our kids, spend time listening to our kids rather than talking at our kids, and actually set them up with good people around them. That sounds pretty simple, but if you can set up really good mentors and give your kids opportunity to spend time with good mentors, then you're on a pretty good track just by doing those very basic things. But don't be too hard on yourself and spend time with your kids, to me, the key messages.
Very good messages there.
Probably the other one I'd suggest with teenagers is that I'm a big one on less words, more action as well with teenagers. I meet so many parents who just keep trying to talk and negotiate with your teenagers, and when they're angry, that's not going to work. And I'd always say, the best thing we can do is control the 4 things for teenagers is control the internet, their mobile phone, transport and money. If you control those 4 things, you control your teenager and you can get them to do whatever you like. If my teenage kids, if their bedrooms aren't clean, at one point, one of them, their bedroom was like a science experiment. There was things growing. Admittedly, she was studying biology, so I thought that was pretty fair. But all I do is I just turn off the Wi-Fi. I change the Wi-Fi password.
Love it.
When their rooms are clean, they get the password.
Yeah.
I don't have to have a discussion. So as I say, less words, more action is probably not a bad idea with our teenagers as well.
Well, it comes back to that old choice and consequence thing.
Oh, very much so.
Tim, don't you? I don't know about you, but I just see a lot of, and maybe it's everyone talks about this sense of entitlement that's growing, but I think the sense of entitlement, when we're pointing the fingers at kids, the 3 that are pointing back at us are communicating that what we tolerate, we teach. And if there's no consequence to an action, then guess what? People aren't going to change. They'll just keep doing it. So what you've just said there in relation to, turning off the Wi-Fi, well, you make the choice to have a dirty room. Well, the consequence is that
that's right.
No access to the internet.
Very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, and you actually don't have to have a big discussion or debate. It's just a very simple action. Yeah, and this is the interesting thing though, because I'm seeing one of the things that worries me is we have a culture, let's blame everybody else for things now, whereas you do have to take responsibility for your own actions and make good choices.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's this sort of growing victim mentality that we're seeing, whereas there's always someone else or something else for the reason why I haven't done something, rather than look in the mirror.
Look in sport, we'll blame the umpires. Hang on. The players made 146 mistakes during the game. The umpire made 1.
Yeah.
But we'll blame the umpire. We'll blame the umpire for the loss.
Or if you can't blame the umpire, let's blame the coach. That's the other one. I reckon the 2 worst jobs in the country are a politician or an elite team coach, mate, because if the team's losing, it's your fault. If the team's winning, it's the players' success. I find it quite amusing, really. Mate, I'd love to delve into your journey around your personal investment side of the equation, if I can, because...
Very much so. So when I left school and started work. So at 16, I was a storeman. And one of our family friends, I'll never forget it, he signed us up for AMP shares. So my first investment was when I was 16 years old. a proportion of my work went into my income went towards buying AMP. I think I had a life insurance policy or something like that.
Yep.
So that was my first taste, and I didn't know a lot about it until the time when AMP shares hit the roof, and then I knew a lot about it, which was sensational. So that helped pay for my first house, funny enough.
Awesome.
With my wife. The other thing is my parents were very helpful, because my parents had this philosophy that if we were students at home, we didn't have to pay board, but if we were working, we basically had to be self-sufficient, so we had to pay board. But what my parents did for us, which was pretty good, was they gave us an interest-free loan to buy a car. So they gave us their old car, and we had to pay it. But Mum was very strict. Every week, I remember, I'd bring home my pay, and I'd have to pay $50 off of my car. So I learned very quickly about managing money and the sorts of commitment. So if you're going to buy something, there is a commitment, and you do have to pay it back. So there were two things I learned very early about saving money, but also having respect for money as well, that nothing was for free. You actually had to earn money. So I think they were very, very good lessons my parents gave me that started me off.
Okay, and where did that lead to then, mate? If we sort of
so then the next thing was age. I can't remember how old, but was when I was engaged to Katie. So we've been married 27 years now. We bought a house, so and that was with some of the AMP investments that we had back from when I was 16. So that was pretty good. And then what we did was did an extension on that and paid that off, or didn't pay it all off, but then moved to a slightly bigger house with children. And at that point, I'd been working up in Whyalla, and Whyalla was interesting because it was the boom in mining, so the house prices were up and down.
Yeah.
I saw an opportunity up there. I saw a house, and it had 3 units on it, but it hadn't been split correctly. So what I did, and I saw it was for sale, so I bought it and then did all the paperwork and actually split it. So set up a strata structure for it, and then sold off the 3.
Yeah.
And so that was my first investment in property as such.
Yeah.
Also, then what else do we have? We bought and built a beach house in Middleton, but also I bought a beach house in Galway as well. So at that point, they were the sort of properties we had, and they were all rented out or we used the beach house in Galway a little bit, but it was sort of a holiday house that was rented out. So they're the investments I had. And then, so if I looked at more recently, what have I done? I think it was probably 10 years ago, I was with a group of mates who are valuers and accountants, and invested into a property in King William Street in Adelaide. So I own a part owner of a unit at 108 King William Street as well.
Okay.
And the last thing I've done recently was in the last 5 years, I set up my own superannuation fund, and so I now bought and own the unit that I work in. So my offices I basically pay myself rent, which is a good way to go too. Yeah. So I always loved the property market, and my wife spends most of her life on realestate.com. So no, it's something one of the great pieces of advice I was given ages ago by an accountant was, you've got to look at, for when you're retirement, and I'm sort of getting closer to that, I guess. Not that I love working, so I can't see myself retiring, but just making sure you have that balance between property and money in shares, and that's what I've been working towards. So yeah, looking pretty good at that.
And any lessons learnt, good and bad, along that property journey that you'd like to share with the listeners, mate?
Yeah, probably one of the mistakes we did make was that I trusted people a little bit too much, and maybe that's part of my nature. Sometimes you do have to be a little bit harder, because that goodwill that people are going to do things for you and they don't, particularly with builders, that was frustrating. So learning not to get upset by it is probably the key thing. And so I'm a lot more relaxed these days with tradies and builders, and but I can see people get very upset. And also it's very difficult because I haven't studied economics, but to read the paper and try and keep on top of what is happening with the world economy. So to look at for example, how the GFC affected income, how the changes in mining impacted upon a place like Whyalla. So to try and get your head around what is happening and look for the opportunities is probably the key things I'd suggest.
Yeah, and it is such a global environment where something that happens in China can have a massive impact on what happens here locally now. It's and the information we've got access to enables us to get across that and then to draw some pretty good insights. So, good suggestions there, mate. I want to jump to the future. You touched on retirement. Talk to me about what your dream lifestyle looks like, how it differs from your current lifestyle, and what, if anything, in addition to property, you're investing in to bridge that gap.
All right, so my current lifestyle is pretty good. I'm in a position where, if I don't put it this way, I don't want for anything as such.
Yeah.
But my wife and I are still very, thoughtful about how we spend our money. And look, a great example is we've been overseas. Do we travel in business class? No. Why? Because we look at it and go, well, if we travel economy, it might be a bit harder for 20 hours, 24 hours, but the difference in savings means we get another 2 holidays.
Exactly.
So, it's just, that's how we see things, how we've been brought up.
Yeah, same.
Both been brought up to have that respect for money.
Yeah.
And so, current lifestyle is really good. I certainly work, 35 to 45 hours a week, depending on what's happening with my practice. And, so I don't have to work weekends, but occasionally I do. So my current lifestyle is very good. My time, I manage that fairly well now, so I make sure I exercise 4 to 5 times a week. So generally very, very good lifestyle. Can't complain. I have my holidays a year. I'd certainly take 4 weeks holiday a year.
Yeah.
Sometimes this year's been a bit more, but that's because we've just had a few things on.
Yeah.
Future lifestyle. I think future lifestyle more will be just probably having 1 day off per week where I might do something like play golf or do things, maybe go join activities like Meals on Wheels or do things to help others within the community, but possibly have a few more holidays as well and go and see a few more places. So I can't see, the only thing that I can see changing my future lifestyle is health.
Yeah.
And that's why I think making sure you look after your health becomes very important as we get older. Because what I'm hoping people are doing and the people listening to this podcast are doing is setting yourself up so that when you are in retirement, your lifestyle's probably not going to change too much. Your working hours will change, but you're fit enough and healthy enough to do the things that you actually look forward to doing with the people that you want to do them with.
Yeah, it's absolutely spot on. Mate, I often have this conversation with people about being, are you rich or are you wealthy? And what I mean by that is, most Australians are rich because we all earn a pretty good income. But wealth for me is about having time on your hands. And one of the questions I often ask is, if you stop work today, how long could you afford to sustain your current lifestyle? How would that, what would the answer be to that in your case, do you think?
Well, here's how I look at it. So currently I would be okay because one of the best pieces of advice I was given was to actually be able to create some product or something that you can do that will earn you income whilst you're asleep.
Yeah.
And that you actually don't have to work too much on. So I've got a couple of projects and a couple of things which I've done which are well on the way of setting that up for me. And so what I've done is written a screening test to identify kids who have learning disabilities, which is an online project. So that's something that'll run by itself without me and generate income. And also written a couple of books as well. So these are the sorts of things that you're hoping will set up ongoing income.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I also look at it for the future and go, okay, well, how much money do I need to survive? And, you sort of work and live within your means as well.
Yeah.
And look, when I'm working with adults, and sometimes it's executives who are stressed, one of the first questions I ask them is, okay, so how much money do you actually need to live, but also to set yourself up for life post-work? Righto. So then to earn that amount of money, how many hours do you need to work?
Yeah.
And you go back and do the maths on it. And it's amazing how many people are working so many more hours to create wealth, to make themselves rich, but at the same time they're neglecting their lifestyle. So they'll be rich but not wealthy.
And they're probably, their health and mental health is probably suffering as a result.
But what's the point of having a huge amount of money if you're rich, if you actually aren't healthy and haven't got good friends around you?
Absolutely.
What's the point of that?
Yeah, no, it's spot on, mate. Let's sort of pivot into everyone's favourite subject, and that's success. So I'd love you to sort of define for us what you believe to be success, and then talk about what you think the secrets are to long-term sustainable success. And I emphasise sustainable because we're not talking one-hit wonders here. We're talking about sort of long-term success. Can you talk to us a bit about your thoughts around that?
Yeah. Success. My definition of success is doing something a little bit better than how you did it yesterday. So that's success. You're improving. Improvement is success. So that's the short-term thing. Keep doing things and striving to always do things a little bit better, whether it's in your conversations with people, your output at work. It doesn't matter, but just keep doing things better. So that's the first start of success. Now, the other thing I think, and this is where a lot of people make mistakes about what is success. I look at it as going, okay, you're achieving a goal and you're reaching your goal. But difficulty is that when people achieve success, they'll often then fail going forward because what they haven't done is really thought through the process. Yeah, and my thinking is I define success as an outcome. All right, so that's the outcome result. Whereas what I'm more interested in is the process. And so what I try and get people to do is become process thinkers. So think through your process. What do I have to do to achieve my outcome? What do I have to do to achieve success? So if I use a golfing analogy, you can have a guy who's played a fantastic round of golf. He's equal, they're going to the 18th, they're in a match play situation against his partner, and every day, he's one up and they're on the last hole. Okay. And every hole he has hit his driver off the tee and he's hit it beautifully, hasn't failed him. But he gets to the last hole and think, I'm one up. I know what I'll do. I'll play conservatively this time and I'll hit my 5 and I'll just lay it up there and then I'll just chip in and then I'll be fine. I'll be in for 4, no problem. So what he's done, he's just thinking about his outcome. Whereas his process hasn't failed him the whole time. So why change your process? All right. So what we've got to do is help people and teach people to become process thinkers. So if you're doing something and it's achieving success, break it down. What are you doing? What is it that's helping you achieve your success? So to me, success is an outcome, and it's a good outcome, and the outcome we're striving for, but get your process right and do a thorough evaluation and make sure you keep doing your processes. You do that, then you'll keep achieving success.
Love that, mate. Mate, good old Malcolm Gladwell, it's become quite famous now for talking about, success is 10,000 hours or, derivations of that. But there's this age-old argument around talent versus training and skill. What's your thinking around that, mate? Because, it's an interesting debate, which there's pros and cons on each side. What's your thinking?
Oh, absolutely. Look, we all have our innate talents, and we all have some skills. Look, the 10,000 hours one, unfortunately, it's not true. Because, right, and I'll tell you why, is because you're forgetting body shape. Yeah. And you're forgetting things like the skill that is required. Okay? So, 10,000 hours and you can achieve anything, all right? If that's what this philosophy is. So, for example, if I get someone who has a very low level of intelligence, all right, and we're going to say, we're going to spend 10,000 hours teaching you to be a pilot, do you want to fly on that plane?
No.
So there you go. So what you've got to do with it, if based on the 10,000 hours principle, it's about making sure that person does have some skill and does have some ability. If you've got some skill, got some ability, that a principle can apply, but it doesn't apply to everyone. Right? That's the first thing you have to remember. And the other thing is, I think the smart thing is to identify where your strengths and weaknesses are. Where do I have my skills? Where do I have my talents? I look at some of the best business partnerships that I see, and the people involved in them all have their strengths. They all have their talents, and that's why they work so well together. One of the guys might be the one who's the social person who will meet the clients, go and have a coffee, go and have a beer, whereas the other half of the partnership is the person who does the numbers, who can sit down and run the figures, do the analysis, actually make sure everything is going to be perfect. Yeah, so it's about finding out where your strengths and where your talents are and running with them as well, and accepting that, hang on, this is not an area of strength of mine, so who can I get to help me in that area?
How do you help people? Because I think we're all our worst critics. Other people can often see in us things that we can't. So getting to the bottom of what our strengths and weaknesses and skills are, mate, what's the best way to do that?
Oh, look, you got to be critical of yourself and analyse and do self-evaluation, but be honest. So if you don't believe that you're able to do something, don't be scared to say, look, this isn't my area of strength. How about we get this person to help us on this one? I think far too often people are scared to say, hey, look, this is not my area. So in psychology, for example, if someone came in, a client came in with eating disorders, I would certainly say, well, look, I'm really sorry, I'm not the person to help you with this. I don't have experience in this area. So it's a weakness.
Yeah.
So I would then refer them on.
Yeah.
And it's about knowing where your strengths and weaknesses are and not being scared to get help and ask for help. But also, where there are areas of weaknesses, go and learn. Go and find people to talk to. Go and ask lots of questions. Read lots of books. Get information, because that way you can build on your areas of weaknesses.
Yeah.
Get support though. You got to have courage enough to identify it, and then go and do something about it.
Yeah, let's talk about courage, because I often feel that in Australia we're very privileged. So, we all live a very good lifestyle, or most of us do, but there's a gap between good and great, and often it comes back to courage, because a lot of us hard-working Aussies in more than full-time jobs, almost like golden handshakes, and that they've got this regular income stream, but having the courage to take the risk to either invest in something else that's going to grow their wealth, or to jump off the cliff and start building their own business. Talk us about that, because you've been through that process yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So as I see it, I'll tell you a story about jumping off the cliff. I remember when I set up my business, and so I'd moved from the regular income of working in a school, and I was 2.5 days a week working in the school. So I set myself up in a part-time job. Yeah. And then the other 2.5 days a week I was in an office with a guy called Graham Winter, who's an organisational psychologist. Yeah. And I used to sit there, and I'd get so excited when my phone rang, because it meant I might have a client. It's just, and I remember when the postman came, I used to get so excited because that meant there might be an envelope with a cheque in it for me back in the day. So you sort of think jumping off a cliff, I look at those moments and think, oh, wow, what a fun time it was. But here's how I look at it. I always think there's good stress and there's bad stress. All right, good stress is what gets us up, gets us going and gets us moving. It motivates us to go out and try things and do things and be active and proactive and learn and keep moving forward. Difficulty is the bad stress is when it gets all too much and we can't cope with it. And so I look at it, this idea of having a crack at things. Yeah, you've got to have a go. Don't be scared to have a go, but you've got to make sure you do all the analysis first. You've got to find good mentors, good people to talk to. So that way you make sure it's good stress rather than bad stress.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to look at it, actually, mate. Mate, talk to us a bit about around that sort of long-term sustainable success piece. My own study of it over the last 30-odd years or more, resilience, patience and persistence seem to be qualities that amongst the 5% that do achieve that, but they're qualities that I see almost withering on the vine in our instant iPhone everything world. What are your thoughts around all that, mate?
Well, very good qualities in people. Resilience. We're losing it, sadly, because I think what I see is that we have a generation of kids coming up who are rescued far too quickly, and as a result of that, they don't develop resilience. Patience. We live in an instant society. And so people, don't have to wait for things. And so, that makes it hard because we have a generation of kids who just want everything to happen tomorrow. And it's not going to happen. You have to learn that it takes time. We have to work slowly through things and build towards it. So it's just something that I think I consider myself an older person these days, that we have to help our young people understand it takes time. I do a thing called a career pyramid when I'm talking to young kids, and I explain how that your career starts, obviously when you finish school and you commence studies, whatever, or go to work. But you've got 70 years potentially of working, to work. So it's close to 50 years of working life ahead of you. So you've got to make sure that you build the stages and put it together step by step by step by step. With the final outcome, is the way I see it, is that by age 50, you want to have choices in your work. Mm. So you get to work in the areas you like, where you're interested in. The hard thing is our young people want to go straight to choices, and they don't want to do the steps, the building blocks in between to get to that point. So that's where we have to help them and guide them.
So how do we do that, mate? How do we rebuild resilience, patience and persistence back into the thinking and behaviours of people moving forward?
Well, the best thing I find is I draw it up on my whiteboard and I explain it to them and show them what it looks like, but help them set goals as well to achieve it. And part of that is sort of the resilience and patience, etc., is making sure they've got the good network around them, got the good people around them to help them. And find out who are the people you can talk to, who are the people that can help you. I'll give you an example. I quite like bike riding, and I was talking to a young cyclist, and I said to him, who was looking for sponsors to go pro. And I said, when you're out riding, training, do you ride by yourself? And he says, yeah, I do most of the time. I said, have you ever thought about when you see a group, particularly of older men and women, maybe just hooking up and riding with them for a while and having a chat to them? And he couldn't work out, why would I want to do that? I said, well, potentially that's where your next sponsor is.
Yeah. So
you ride along, have a chat, maybe stop and have a coffee. It's amazing what you can do just through talking to people and networking with people. So I think one of the key things is talking to people and learning from people as well. That's how you build those skills up.
Yeah, and the interesting thing I'd find also is that coming back to the infamous iPhone, I see a lot of the younger generation spend most of their communication with their fingers rather than their mouth. And as I constantly say to our team, we're not in the property, finance or investment business. We're actually in the relationship and communication business. Yeah. And it's having those conversations and having those remarkable interactions with people that fuel the ongoing opportunity. But I find, so again, as a challenge, how are you getting them to break over that, what I see as a barrier in a lot of young kids that are brave enough to actually have that conversation with someone they don't know?
Yeah, well, it's about going out and joining community activities, sporting activities, and asking questions. And not being scared to listen, and find out who's a person that might be able to help you, and ask. Don't ever be scared to ask, to go and have a coffee with someone or to have a chat to someone. I look at the guys I hang out with and the ladies and wives, etc., and they're all wonderful people who are very generous with their time. They're all always happy to help a young person who's prepared to learn. Yeah, so I just think you've got to look at the network and look at where are the people who I can learn from. But also don't be scared to read books and ask.
Yeah.
And there's so much information now, biographies, that you can read about people and what they've done and how they did it to give yourself some ideas.
Yeah, I love it, mate. The sort of semi-related to that, the concept of self-talk, because I know in my own case, mate, and having had a number of challenges over my journey so far, the inner voice subconsciously can be doing damage that you're not even aware of.
Oh, yes.
How do you help people through that, where it almost becomes destructive, so that, in their conscious self they are saying all the right things, but because of whatever message that have been sown early on in that subconscious, it keeps tripping them up? How do you help people start to become more positive and achieve those outcomes without sabotaging themselves?
Go visual is one of the key things. Is you actually put visual cues up, visual reminders up to actually so you can see what's ahead of you, see what you're trying to do, keep yourself on track. You see, the thing I find is, for most people, a lot of the doubt tends to creep in at night when they're about to go to sleep. They lie there, the brain switches on, starts spinning. Whereas my idea is, if you can have visual cues and things that you can see to remind you that, hang on, I am on the right track. I am ticking the boxes that I have to tick. I am meeting my goals. That's probably one of the first things I would do to make sure you get rid of the negative self-talk. But also the other thing is, before you go to bed, actually write down all of the stuff that's on your mind and then write out solutions for it. So, for example, difficult conversation with the bank that's on your mind. Okay, write it down. What's my action? I've got to make time to ring the bank. Who can help me with it? All right, best I talk to the accountant before I have that conversation. So you actually get things out of your head onto paper and set up solutions for it. Yeah. So that way you've got plans in place. So get it out of your head. It's probably one of the first things I'd suggest.
Yeah, I love it. And
visual cues.
Yeah, give us an example of visual cue that listeners might sort of tune into.
When I was teaching, I was teaching full time and studying psychology full time.
Yeah.
So at my desk, I would have three pictures. I had a picture of a dollar sign, and the dollar sign meant that if I finished my psychology studies, I would earn a lot more money than what I would teaching. I had a picture of a clock, and the clock reminded me that if I finished my psychology studies, I'd be able to choose my time. I would be in control of my time, and I wouldn't be governed by the bells like I was when I was teaching. And the final picture was a stick man surfing, and it meant that I'd have more time to go surfing. So they were the three things. So I'd have those sitting up across my where my study desk was. And those days when I didn't feel like studying, or it's a bit flat, I'd just look at those three things, and it reminded me of why I was putting in some hard yards.
Love it.
Really simple.
Love it. Yeah, I'm a bit of a vision board person myself, mate. So it
helps. It does help.
Absolutely amazing how even subliminally that has helped me over the years. So love that, mate. That's awesome. Now another term I hear bandied around a lot, Tim, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, is the magic word balance. There's work-life balance, there's balance this, there's balance that. There's we all need to live a balanced lifestyle. What does that mean to you, and how can you help people achieve it?
Well, it's interesting because, first of all, balance is different for everybody. All right, so you can't just say, "Oh, no, you have to be balanced." All right, so I don't think you can judge others when they say they've got a balanced lifestyle or not. It's different. It's a different thing for everyone. Yeah. So my philosophy is I look at so if I'm doing a counselling session with someone who's stressed, for example, I always put the 4 areas up. So I go, area number 1 is self, area number 2 is work, area number 3 is friendships, and area number 4 is relationship. And I get them to rate them out of 10 and how they feel they're travelling across all those areas. And then, so you do a bit of a self-evaluation, and then we look at to see, okay, so where's all your time going? How do we improve different areas of your life? So that way I try and get people balanced across those 4 areas, right? But sometimes it's not possible because we all have times when we're going to have a lot more work on than quiet times and flat times. So the trick is, as I see it, is to make sure you keep balanced, is learn, as you go along working, learn about your work cycles. When are the busy times? When are the flat times? So when you've got the flat times, enjoy the flat times and make sure that you have some holidays and maybe, go out for lunch every now and then. But when you have the busy times, put the hours in. But the key for me about getting balance is knowing how work goes throughout a year, learning the patterns, learning the processes of it all, and then setting up times and sticking to those times when you are going to do things to look after yourself. So I work on the idea with my own work because I'm school focused a lot. I know when it's school holidays, I'm going to be fairly quiet at work. So what do? Make sure I take some time off and have some holidays in those times.
Yeah, no, awesome. Mate, another thing that I sense is a bit of all-pervading at the moment is this endless pursuit of perfectionism, and offset with very high expectations that we're all putting out on ourselves. A lot to do with the deluge of social media images of the perfect life that we keep seeing. What's your view around that and how people should respond and manage those expectations?
It's the term Facebook crafting. Yeah. So what people do is craft a lifestyle on Facebook so that it looks like their life is brilliant, and what it does, it makes others feel inferior. Because people then question, why didn't I get invited to that party, or why can't I out at those fancy restaurants, or why can't I have that holiday? So people craft a perfect lifestyle through social media, and that causes a lot of harm. So one of the things that I suggest is, as people, what we have to do is focus on what we're doing and make sure you're doing it well. So making sure that you're enjoying your work, spending time with people who you like, keeping yourself fit and healthy, and pay a lot less attention to what everyone else is doing and make sure that you're going well, is how I look at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on. Mate, I'm going to jump into the old ambush session now if I can.
Oh, okay.
Which 5 quick questions that listeners keep wanting answers to.
Sure.
So kicking straight into that, mate, what's your favourite quote and why?
No one ever got worse through practicing.
Love it.
And that's a great sporting quote, but I think you can apply that across all areas, and that to me is practice, practice, practice. One of my friends, he came to me about his golf, and he wanted some psychology to help his golf out. And I said, so mate, he told me what was happening, and I just said, go and practice.
Yep.
It's one of these funny things is that people will think, as a psychologist, you can fix everything, but you can't. You've actually got to practice. You've got to have the skills in place, and you've got to practice them. So, favourite quote, no one ever got worse through practicing.
Yeah, that's a cracker. Mate, turning to the literary side of things, you've mentioned books a couple of times and you've obviously got a personal involvement there. What's the top book that you would recommend the listeners grab and why?
It's called Lucy Brown Writes Upside Down, and it's because I wrote it. No, it's...
that's a... well, let's talk about that first. I'd like to know about it, mate.
No, what it is, it's a book... I'm very, very passionate about helping kids who find school difficult, who don't like school. So I wrote this kids' book called Lucy Brown Writes Upside Down, aimed at helping kids understand it's okay to find things difficult, and that we all have our strengths. And so it's about learning to understand we all have things that we're good at, but it's okay to find things that you're not so good at. So, and we've got to try to at those areas, but acknowledge our strengths. And what I'm hoping is that schools will get on board and use it to help kids understand it's okay to find things hard. So, no, but actually, the book I recommend is The Business Athlete by Graham Winter.
Yeah, okay. Why?
Really, because of sport. It sort of uses analogies of business and sport, and as a sporting fan, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyone who reads like sport will enjoy that book because it just helps you use sporting terms and analogies to drive yourself through business. I think it's a really good one.
Yeah, cracker. Now, this one's a little bit left field, but it's a question we often get because a lot of Aussies believe they pay too much tax. What's the top legal thing that you've done to minimise how much tax you pay, Tim?
I studied accounting when I was doing teaching.
Yeah.
So I do have a background in accounting and find a really good accountant.
Yeah. It
was my first piece of advice.
Yeah.
Someone who you can talk to who gives you good advice. And then what I've always done is looked at, how do we know the tax rules, know the tax laws, learn about them, and so you know what you can claim, know what you can't claim, and then make sure you follow those laws to the best of your ability. And so that was the first thing. And then also having a self-managed super fund has been pretty helpful for me as well.
Yeah, great.
So I'm paying rent to myself rather than rent to someone else.
Yeah, it's
so that's but gee, have a good accountant.
Yeah,
you've got to because it's too many tax laws for people to understand. So you need to find people who are really switched on with it.
Yeah,
and it will guide you well.
Yeah, love that, mate. Coming back to the investment topic, what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received?
Oh, I should have said this at the start. Actually, my first investment, I forgot about this, was a mate of mine decided that we're going to invest. This was when 15 years old in year 10 at school, invest in stamps. So we all gave him, I reckon, $10, which was a lot of money back then. And he bought all these stamps. And I never saw them, so God knows what's ever happened to them. Probably the worst piece of advice was investing in stamps.
You love that one. That's a good one.
Best piece of investment advice, it was be patient. Yeah, and I think you look at the idea of, we see a lot of films, for example. I watched a movie called The Hummingbird Project the other day, and it's about the setting up of the stock exchange line from Kansas to New York 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And, we see people talking about making millions and millions and millions of dollars overnight. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. So probably the best piece of advice I was given was be patient, but also make sure you talk to the right people.
Yeah, no, spot on. The patience again is definitely... If you look at anything, whether it be nature, you name it, it always takes time. So you've got to see it through. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And don't be scared to listen to people and hear ideas as well.
Yeah. Now, mate, this is an area that'll be right up your alley because I often sort of come to the conclusion of the exercise by asking you, if you were talking to a school leaver, what would you advise them to invest their time, energy, money and skills in to enjoy their version of freedom?
I would think that what they've got to look at is, first thing I would be doing is to go out and look at what they're interested in. So what sort of jobs, what sort of lifestyle do you want, what are you interested in doing, but also get them to explore the real reasons why. I get worried when I see kids who just go off to university, do the same thing that their parents did, and they don't actually like it. They're not interested in it. So that would be one of the things I would do. And then for the young person, I'd actually be saying be patient and plan. So look at setting up small steps, small stages, and surround yourself with good people as well. Build a network. Make sure you really build a strong network. And your network doesn't just have to be your mates. To have some older people in your network, I think, is very important as well. It's just some people who can provide guidance, some mentors you can ask lots of questions of. So that would be the advice I'd be giving them.
Yeah, no, it's some gold there, mate. Awesome. So, sort of wrapping it up, if people want to reach out to you, mate, whether it be help for their kids, themselves, or others, how do they do that?
Oh, look, you just get to me via my website. So that's if you just Google Tim Dansie Psychology. Probably one of the other things I didn't say.
Yeah.
Which I should have touched on. I think I have a. I hope your listeners enjoy this, but we talk about keeping ourselves balanced, and I always say that I have the 5 secrets of happiness, which I think this is personally what I apply to my own life that keeps me on track. And I always say the first thing I do is exercise. So number 1 is exercise. Keep exercising because you often think better and you always feel better. Number 2 is learn. Always keep learning something, whether it's learning to cook something new, watching a documentary, reading a book, listening to a podcast. Yeah, learning is very important. Number 3 is give. I'm a big believer in that we've got to do things for others without asking anything in return. And by that I mean, when you go into a shop, say please and thank you. Tell the person, geez, that was a good coffee. Thank you. Make them feel good through you giving compliments. Be the person in the office who brings in some biscuits, some cake, whatever it might be. And so just giving. Number 4 is surround yourself with positive people. I think we all have people in our lives who are what I call the dementors. They just suck the goodness out of you. Find the good people. Hang out with the good people. You feel so much better. People who give you life, give you energy. And the last one is take notice. To be able to walk outside and go, Jesus, good day, and see the little things, appreciate the little things. So my advice is to anyone is to apply those 5 principles to your life, and then I think you can generally be a lot happier. So invest in yourself to do those 5 things.
Yeah, that's gold, mate. There are some really easy to apply things there. And I've always said, mate, that happiness is a choice, not a situation or a circumstance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But do those things and that certainly leads to happiness.
Mate, that's absolute gold. What's next new and exciting for you, mate?
Well, still building the Lucy Brown book. So we're getting that out into the world. So we've got it in schools at the moment. So working on that. Also working on the app, the learning app, and I'm actually going to be heading off interstate running some seminars in, where am I going? Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne, Darwin, I think, running seminars for teachers on how to help kids who have learning difficulties. So area I'm very passionate about. So that's probably in the coming months I'll be working on those, getting them going. And then also just day-to-day practice in the office. So pretty good.
Yeah.
Can't complain.
Got a great lifestyle there, mate. I love the way you've bridged the sport with psychology and your passion for helping those who have struggles with learning to overcome and deal with that, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
No, fantastic. Thank you.
It's the awareness of self is something that most of us need to do more mirror work on. And having someone like yourself, because I think there's often a perception of psychologists that you only see one if there's something wrong with you. My view is that if we're truly going to learn, and most of those learnings are the ones that we need to make, not anyone else, you can only do that with someone who understands thinking, attitudes, the subconscious, the conscious, and can give you sort of actionable things and some accountability to make sure that you're actually doing the work to overcome some of those things that we might be invisible to us but are very obvious to someone like you.
Yeah, it's amazing how many clients I have who are people who I've seen when they were actually students who've then gone off to university who are now working. And all I do is they come in a couple of times a year and we just have a chat, and all I do is do some mentoring and some guidance. So yeah, that they don't come to me because there's anything going wrong. It's more about making sure they're keeping on track. Yeah, which is wonderful, something I really enjoy.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Look, keep up the fantastic work. Really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we'll stay in touch, mate. Thanks, Tim.
I look forward to it.
Cheers, mate. Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/get invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you'll live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.